Hello, and welcome to my podcast, Good Grief. My name is Dr. Christine Malone, and in this podcast, we talk about trauma, tragedy, and survival. In each episode, I will interview someone that has gone through grief in some way, and we will discuss the impact it has had on their life. By sharing these stories, we hope that others won't feel alone should they be going through similar situations. Enjoy. Okay, listeners, thank you so much for joining me for this podcast. My guest today is Kevin. He is a speaker, podcaster, and podcasting coach. And he's going to tell us a story about kind of where he's come from in earlier life and what he's doing today. So, Kevin, if you would tell us a bit about yourself.
Yes. Well, first of all, Dr. Christine, I appreciate you having me on. Today, I am the founder, CFO, and host of Next Level University. We are a global top 100 podcast, and I coach a lot of other podcasters, and we have a ton of different business things that we have going on. But I'm really, truly someone who wants to be the person I needed when I was at my lowest point. And I'm sure we're going to touch on that at some point during our conversation today. But that's really me. I'm a simple man. I'm married. I have an amazing wife. I have 2 kids that I love with all my heart, and that's my family, and they're one of the reasons I work as hard as I do.
Yes, I can totally appreciate that. Although it's for me, I have 4 dogs. I'm not much cat person, but dogs for sure. So I know that you had earlier in your life where you had kind of a brush with what sounded like kind of real depression or something that led you to even have suicide ideation. So tell us a bit about what got you there, and then kind of how you got over that spot of that tunnel vision of thinking about suicide.
Growing up, I don't think there was a lot of hope for me. I don't think people projected that I was going to make it very far in life. I was raised by my mom and my grandmother, lower middle class for sure. Didn't know my dad. I didn't meet my dad until I was 27. And I made the decision when I was in high school that I wasn't going to go to college. So I started doing a bunch of odd jobs, and I would pump gas at the local gas station. I cleaned hospital floors and toilets, forklift operator, truck driver, personal trainer, whatever I could do to make money, I was in to do. But in my early 20s, I got this job in an industry called weatherization. And all that means is we go into buildings and we make them more energy efficient. So I went from making $15 an hour to $60 an hour pretty much overnight. And in my mind, that was going to fix all of the internal stuff that I had never faced. I thought, yeah, this is going to be fine. So if you fast forward, I was 25 and my girlfriend was a model. I had just competed in and won a bodybuilding show, so I was in the best shape of my life. Sports car, high-paying job, new apartment, all the external results. But I was very insecure. I was very anxious. I was definitely showing signs of depression. I was afraid of being left behind. I was very scarce. I was a very scarce human at that stage of my life. And my girlfriend wanted to move from the East Coast to California to chase her dreams. And I gave her every reason in the world why she shouldn't, because I was afraid she'd go and she'd forget about me. And she ended up leaving me, as she should have. And that was my initial rock bottom. I'm heartbroken. I'm living by myself. My bills just doubled. Work is slow. I don't know what to do. So I come to terms with the fact that if I make a boatload of money, everything's going to be fine. I fell back into the same trap you'd think I'd figured out the first time. So the next year, I spent 10 months living on the road because most of our contracts were in other states. So I would stay in hotels 5 days a week and go home for the weekend. And we got to the end of the year, and I spent 10 months on the road trying to accumulate wealth. And I made $100,000 at 26 with no college degree. And I had this very powerful moment when I slid open my final pay stub where I realized for most of my life, and especially that year, I had lived unconsciously. I had no idea why I was doing what I was doing. The opposite of unconscious is hyperconscious. So I started a podcast in 2017 called the Hyperconscious Podcast. I want to understand myself at a deep level. I fell in love with podcasting as I fell out of love with my job. I've reached the pinnacle. I don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to live in the road. This isn't the key to what I actually want. But I'm not making any money with a podcast, so I have to keep doing it. And that's where things started to turn, because it's not like I would just go to a job I didn't like and then come home at night. I would pack a suitcase. I'd drive 6 hours on Sunday. I'd live in a hotel for the entire week, drive home, and I'd be home for like a day and a half. So I started calling out. I started leaving the job sites early, showing up late. And eventually this all culminated in me waking up in a hotel room in New Jersey, which was 6 hours away from where I lived. And my alarm clock went off at 5:15. I sat up, I slid to the edge of the bed, I was lacing up my work boots. And the best way to explain it is there was 10 televisions on in my head at the same time, and every single one was on a different station. And one is saying, I know you don't want to do this anymore, but you're stuck. People like you don't get opportunities like this. Never mind, leave them behind. If you did ever work up the courage or stupidity, depending on how you want to look at it, to leave this job, what are you going to do with your life? That was a big one. What are your friends going to think? What's your family going to think? Those were all things going on in my head. And I just felt so stuck in dark. And in that moment, I thought to myself, if I was to take my life, I would take all of my problems with me, and that would sure be a lot easier than what I'm dealing with. And I ended up texting my business partner, who was just my friend at the time. And I explained to him what I was feeling and what I was dealing with and the thoughts I was having. And he said, Kev, over the last few years, your awareness has changed a ton, but your environments have remained the same. I think it's time for you to change your environment. He's very wise, Christine. He's very wise. And I ended up leaving that job 3 or 4 months later and going full time into trying to figure out this whole podcast business thing. And I have been doing this full time since 2018.
Well, that's wonderful. I love your story.
Thank you.
Parts of it are very, I can relate to it in a great deal. Certainly getting to the point where it seems like I could take my problems away by just ending my own life. I've been there. And so on. And I've also, when I was, before I became, I hate to use the word self-aware because I'm not sure I'm actually there. I used to think that the world was all about how much money I could make and how important I was and what my title was and so on and so forth. But then when I had some traumatic events happen in my life and I sort of snapped out of that and thought, this is really not what I do. So I went into teaching full time, which I made at the time, I think I took it about at least 10 times pay cut to do that, which was not easy, but I'm so much happier where I am. So I totally get that. Sometimes making that jump is what you need to do. And it's scary and it's hard, but it hopefully turns out. So, so you have, when you said you've taken your life to the next level and achieved both personal and professional success. So tell us a bit about what you mean by that. I mean, obviously you're happier in your work. You're happily married. You've got these cats. You've got a great podcast, so on. But what does that really look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to describe it is I'm actually fulfilled and I'm proud of myself. And I feel like my self-worth has actually caught up to where it should be. And my self-belief has caught up to where it should be. I'm actually excited for the future. And that's something that I never had before. I never was excited for the future. So now it's really, I'm very regimented. I'm a very regimented human being. So I pretty much live from a spreadsheet. And I track the same 26 habits every single day. And that's how I live my life. So I learn every single day. My wife and I play the gratitude game before we go to bed every night, where we say what we're grateful for about each other. I'm podcasting every single day. It really came down to the habits. I worked really, really diligently on making a lot of money, and I made money. Cool. I worked really diligently on getting in really good shape and looking good without a shirt on. Cool. I never worked on internal Kev. I always worked on external Kev. And I was always more focused on looking good and looking successful than feeling good and feeling successful. So really what the last coming up on 7 years have taught me is that self-improvement is really going to dictate the level of success that I have, quote unquote. And now to me, success is doing what I love, impacting other people, but also building a truly fulfilling life. And when I say taking life to the next level, it's that. It's being competent, being confident, being understanding, being patient, being a good communicator, being empathetic, being vulnerable, just being the best human I can be, because I believe that will help me help more people, be a better partner, be a better business owner, be a better coach, be all those things.
That makes sense. And I'm guessing because the title of your podcast is Next Level Universe or Next Level University. Okay, whichever. Anyway, that you are helping other people to get to that same space. So give us some examples of kind of what sort of topics you do and conversations you have on your podcast.
We literally recorded an episode today. It was all about if if you're not able to celebrate yourself, who is going to help you celebrate? And this came from a discussion that we had on one of our team calls, where we have several people on our team who have exercised every single day for 365 days. They have not missed a day. They've held that promise to themselves, but they're afraid to post something like that on social media because they're afraid they're going to get villainized for doing such an amazing thing for themselves that might trigger a lot of other people. So we had a very vulnerable conversation about why we think that is and what to do if you're listening. We are talking a lot about external success, but we always try to give you the internal stuff first. So there's a lot of podcasts out there that are going to tell you how to make more money, right? 5 ways to make more money. If you have a money block because you grew up in a less than fortunate situation, or you've villainized people in the past who have a lot of money, those 5 ways might not do anything. So that's really what we're trying to get to. We're trying to get to the root of why things are the way they are. And then we can give you new tactics, but tactics that fit the new identity. That's really what we're talking about in a nutshell. And it's broken up into health, wealth, and love. So health, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual; wealth, how you make your money, what do you do with it? And then love, self-love, others love, love for what you do in the world, that type of stuff.
So how do you come up with your topics? I mean, a podcast every day seems daunting to me. I do maybe 3 or 4 a week. So and I only release 1 a week, but how do you come up with topics? And I mean, I guess there's a lot out there in that realm of what you could do, but how do you come up with a topic and a conversation?
I try to take it from personal experiences. So I will think to myself, okay, my wife and I are going out. We're going to go do something. How can I prime my mind for lessons, stories, examples that I can then turn into quality episodes? That's really where it comes from for me. And it's hard because I don't do a lot. I'm working so much that I don't really go out and do much. But for me, I want it to be a personal experience and story because that's what's going to move me. I don't want to just look up what are the top 25 self-improvement things to talk about, because it's just, I'll be faking it. It won't be real and I won't be passionate about it. And I think that'll show through. So it's a challenge. I get writer's block. I get podcaster's block, whatever you want to call it. But then I just sit with it and say, all right, what have I experienced? What has a client experienced? What did I learn on another podcast? What were some great questions that I got asked? So I'm always thumbing through the Rolodex of my own experiences to figure out, how do we get another 7 episodes out this week?
Yeah, again, the word daunting comes to mind for me. So tell me about the podcasting coach aspect of what you're doing. So podcasters, they find you, they're looking for what? You're providing them with what? How does that all go?
It's wild to me that any of it is even real, because this was never what I thought was going to happen. But when I was like 500 episodes in, one of my mentors reached out to me and he said, hey, I have a buddy who wants to start a podcast. You should help him. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And I don't think I know what I'm talking about either. And he said, trust me, you know more than you think. You should help this person. So we ended up producing this person's podcast. We did all the audio editing, the video editing, all that stuff. And I would coach him on how to grow and make money from a podcast. And that really is what I do. I help people understand what are the benefits of a podcast, becoming a better speaker, becoming a better communicator, what you should be doing on social media, how to build a business from your podcast, the topics, finding your audience. And today we produce and I coach 52 or 53 other podcasters. So it's actually become a very successful branch of our business. And it also helps me because I get to learn what other people are struggling with and what's working for other people, what's not working for other people. So that is the majority of my time, is our podcast, being on other podcasts, which I do a lot of, or coaching. I pretty much live on Zoom. And that is why I am just so used to talking in front of this microphone. And this is kind of my life in a nutshell.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, how many hours a week do you work? Because that sounds like an awful lot of work. So
yeah, I had 40 calls this week. And that's not including our 7 episodes or the 7 workouts I did. So there's a lot of time invested.
Yeah, no, I'm also thinking with all of your, everything you've talked about, if you've thought about writing a book. I've written a few and I've interviewed people who've written books, and it's just kind of, putting it all in like a nutshell version of, how to find yourself or those types of things, if you've thought about that.
Maybe one day. I'm way more of a speaker. So if I can find someone who wants to write it, and I'll just like go and let me talk. Sure. I have no interest in sitting down and penning a book or typing a book. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, you need to find a writer. That's
Yes.
for sure. I'm one of those people who love to sit down and write my books. Like way too many in the hopper, but yeah, I just think you could really have a lot to offer there for someone who maybe doesn't have time to sit and I don't know. Listen, for me, a book is I'm a avid reader. Like especially if I'm flying or somewhere, if I'm a
Yeah.
passenger anywhere, I gotta have. I'm a purist. I got a paper. But reading that book, really, I get a lot out of that, and I love books that are about not necessarily self help, but self growth and all that kind of stuff, which is exactly what you're telling us about. So my question for you is going to be if you have any other projects you're working on, but I'm hearing that I don't know how you have time, but just what else you've got going on besides the podcast, the coaching, so on.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We do live events. We do group coaching. We have an app in development. It's in earlier development for habit tracking to help people be more consistent. We're creating it's called the Next Level Dreamliner. It's going to be kind of a scheduler, calendar, another thing to help people be more productive and consistent. So yeah, there's a ton going on behind the scenes, but again, you would never know because it just looks like a podcast. So yeah, that's happening. I'm excited to travel a little bit next year because I haven't done that really since I started this 7 years ago. I haven't taken almost any time off. So I'm excited about that. We have a charity called the Next Level Hope Foundation for children of single parents, since my business partner and I were both raised by single parents. So that's another thing we have going on. So yes, there is no shortage of things to do, Christine.
No, I'm hearing that for sure. I'm getting it. I'm also, and of course, in my mind, I'm always working. So I'm thinking, well, you could do your podcast when you go traveling, but I don't
I
know
have.
but I'm just like, oh, I would just fit this in and do this here and whatever.
Yeah.
Is your podcast live or is it taped and or played later?
Taped and recorded. We do we try to record 7 episodes on Monday and then we just upload them. And then we have an amazing team that helps us with it. So we try to just batch them all. And then the rest of the week is all sorts of other stuff.
All sorts of other projects and things you've got going on. So
yes.
gosh, I'm so impressed with all the things that you've done. So
well, thank you.
I'm curious to know, is there anything else you would like to share with listeners about any of the aspects you've shared? So like the self-worth part, the kind of learning who you want to be and why you want to be there and so on. Coming out of that space of, I guess, locked in, I think, I can't remember how you phrase that, of just, think you're kind of stuck there kind of thing.
Yeah.
How would you recommend someone start taking those baby steps?
Yeah, I always feel a little bit jaded when I get asked that question because transparently, when I left my job, my depression went away to that degree. I mean, I still have very, very minor days, but not like that. Not like that. It went away completely. My anxiety got drastically worse though, because I had so much uncertainty. I was having panic attacks. It was brutal. I would say, I think the value I could probably add is many people say, how did you have the courage to reach out to someone? And I always say this, you do not make an umbrella when it starts raining. You make the umbrella long before the storm comes so you're ready when it does. I had so many vulnerable conversations with Alan that there was no question who I was going to reach out to. It was going to be Alan. I'm going to reach out to Alan. Alan has answers, but I know he'll listen and he won't judge me. So the advice I would give would be, even if you're listening to this right now and you feel amazing and you feel like nothing like that could ever happen to you, build relationships that are real, authentic, and vulnerable, because when it does, hopefully it won't, but if it does come to that point, you'll know who to reach out to.
Yeah.
That I know it's hard to say because if you're dealing with that right now, but then my question would be, who is someone you feel safe with? There might be someone you feel safe with. I won't say there's got to be, because unfortunately, maybe there isn't yet.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely understand that. I know in times of my life, I've often said you find out who your true friends are when you're going through something difficult. And
yeah,
one of the things I learned was figure out who those people are before you start going through something difficult. So I love
100%.
Your umbrella analogy is certainly hitting me where it needs to hit me. So we are going to be linking to all of you have social media websites and so on when we post your podcast. But is there anything else you want to share before we go?
I would just say this. I would say the biggest difference between the person you are today and the person you want to be eventually is what you do, your habits. So if you can just start practicing one new positive habit, a lot can change in a couple of years. I started with 5 simple habits and here we are many years later, and I feel like a different man in many ways.
Yeah, it's those baby steps. I think it's kind of like
100%.
people that want to lose weight. It's not going to happen overnight. You need to work at these things. So I think that's
100%.
what I'm definitely hearing here. So, Well, Kevin, thank you so much for being my guest today. I really appreciate you, and it was very nice to meet you.
You as well. I appreciate you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Good Grief. To hear more about my personal story, please pick up a copy of my book, The Day I Became the Spider Killer, a memoir of trauma, tragedy, and survival, available in paperback, Kindle, and Audible via Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other online book retailers.